Welcome to the Cashflow Academy podcast. I'm Andy Tanner. We have a fantastic show on deck. Very, very exciting. This is where we make investing simple. And what we're going to do today is make it a lot more easy, a lot easier, a lot simpler. My guest is Steven Goldstein. He's written a book called Mastering the Mental Game of Trading, Harnessing the Power of the Inner Self to Fuel Trading Outperformance. Before I introduce Steven, a welcome to you for listening. We have no podcast without listeners, and the number of listeners we've drawn has been beyond our wildest expectations. So there's lots of pressure on me to just really deliver great content that is a blessing to your life. This is where we make investing simple. Speaking of content, you can go to myinvestingclass.com and learn more about what we do if you want to further your trading education. And speaking of trading education, part of this, I've said this many times. When a person decides to be an entrepreneur or an investor, to make money in a different way than a traditional job, whether they know it or not, they have embarked on a journey of personal development. One of the favorite books I've read is that I mention often is by Warren Buffett's mentor, Benjamin Graham, called The Intelligent Investor. And it was not a book on how to invest, really. Securities analysis is a doorstop book that you can read for analyzing securities. This is more about, that's kind of a book on managing emotions and managing your brain and understanding more now. I mean, that book was written so long ago, it gives good advice. But now we have, a lot more we know about how we react and how we make decisions. And so I am thrilled to have Steven Goldstein with us, who, we're going to talk about mastering the mental game of trading. And I will just tell you that when I go back and I look at the mistakes I've made, and I look at the, like the big losses where I really, laid an egg, man, where I really screwed up, it was almost always, without exception, some type of mental lapse in human frailty, as opposed to perhaps a lack of knowledge of the trade. So with this introduction, I think you're going to be set for having a wonderful experience today. Steven Goldstein, welcome to the podcast, and thank you for being willing to discuss the mental game of mastering the mental game of trading today.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
So you're joining us from London, which
Yeah,
before the show we were talking, and I said my wife and I enjoy London, and particularly she loves Harrods. That is her domain when she goes there. But just a wonderful place, and we appreciate you, managing the time change. So this is great. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you came into this field, and what made you decide to author this book.
okay. So I've been in and around financial markets for close to 40 years. I started as a trader at a Japanese bank in London in the mid 1980s, working in the area of rates and foreign exchange. And over the next 25 years, I continued as a trader working for investment banks, both in market making roles and proprietary trading roles. And I had an experience about halfway through that when I came to work with an executive coach. It was a project we were running at the bank I was working at, and that that really transformed my journey as a trader. The particular style and approach that he used was a highly reflective approach and encouraged you to look inwards at yourself and also at the broader landscape of the job you're doing and the world you're working in, and to really sort of start to understand all of that with much greater nuance, rather than necessarily looking out there for the answers, thinking the answers are out there in the news, the data, the information. And that changed things for me. I went from, I would say, a moderately performing trader, or ups and downs, some really good periods, some challenging periods, to someone who finally got it. And that was after about 13 years. And my performance just went on an upward trajectory over the next 10 years. So I look at my career in those two halves, the pre-coaching and the post-coaching. And then it was a return visit to that coach about 10 years later, where he kind of seeded the idea of me doing this coaching work myself, of studying to become a coach, learning executive coaching. It was something which attracted me anyway. And I decided at that sort of career crossroads that I'd like to go down that road, and maybe I could work with the traders, work with many of the people who I've got to know over the past 25 years, or the industry, because it felt there wasn't enough focus placed on this part of us in the industry. How can we could do it better? How we can be better? How we can perform better? And that's what I started to do. I started to work with traders. I studied lots of different elements of the psychotherapeutic side of what you're doing when you're engaged with risks and markets. And often I think you talked about your 2008 experience, the traumas that actually visits back on us.
Yeah.
Um, and all of that, which impacts the way we make decisions and choices and engage with risk and uncertainty. And I saw a lot of improvement with the people I was working with. And I had a passion, a real curiosity about this. So I started writing about it. A publisher saw some of the stuff I was writing online and just said, would you be interested in writing a book? And, I felt there was something that I had something to say that hasn't really been said yet. It's been touched upon in lots of books, but I wanted to take it much more in depth into this personal battle with who we are and how we are. And I developed some frameworks which I'd also taken from sort of the studies in psychotherapy that I'd gone into. And I took those out of psychotherapy and sort of readapted them and made them a little bit more user friendly um, for the trading world. And that's really what the book is. It's a collection of my thoughts, my stories, my experiences, the stories of my clients, built around these frameworks and ideas that I've brought with me from those studies that I know have made a big difference to them, have personally made a big difference to me, and brings people to a kind of almost like a higher self-awareness when they're engaging with markets, which improves their performance.
Well, this is a great introduction, a great foundation to build upon. When I have a person who wants to trade, and there's a style that people find, there's many pathways to heaven, many different strategies you can use. So you
Yeah,
kind of find your niche and land. Eventually people find where they're most comfortable with. But when I have people that are brand new, I will often and I think this would be a great way to launch our discussion inside of your book, is I say, if you go to a casino, watch the people that are playing the game and watch the people that are running the game, and you'll see an entirely different emotional experience. People that play the games tend to exclaim, and you'll see, if you had a silent movie, the pictures would be of victory and just despair, and there's a gamut of emotional 4K in every way, victory and defeat, highs and lows. Then if you flip over and watch the dealer or the pit boss, those people are made out of cardboard. It's this: keep the game rolling, boys. And
yeah,
we have a system, we have some rules we're going to follow. And regardless of the outcome of any individual hand, we will just keep it rolling, boys. Keep it rolling. And so it's interesting to see. Life should be exciting, but if you want to get into markets and you want to be a more active trader, I personally really love the foundation of shares and
mm,
owning shares of companies, but I love to accelerate that with layer on top of that option trading. And so you have disciplines in both. There's a real temptation even for investors when things are starting to fall to pieces, to run when they shouldn't run. So even the investors have to deal with these swings. So maybe speak a little bit about the player style versus the casino style. Would that be a good place to start?
yeah, it'd be great. And it's really interesting how you bring that. So, and again, I we can look at trading really as two almost distinct activities. We talk about trading. It's the same in investing. Anything where you're taking risk, you can sort of split out into these two different approaches. And I use the blackjack analogy to really highlight that, where you're sitting as the dealer playing for the house,
Yeah,
and the house has an edge. The house makes the game. The house makes the market. The house is the
yeah,
market maker. And the house, to do that, the house has to be rewarded for it. So the game is, and I know this doesn't always sound like the greatest term, but rigged in the favor of the house. It has to be, otherwise the game won't exist. Okay.
exactly.
So
Yeah,
we can say that in every market, there's a house. There always is. And the game's rigged their favor. Otherwise, the game doesn't exist. Okay. It's the exchanges, it's the banks, it's the big broking firms, it's the governments. Unfortunately, it's the casinos.
yeah,
Okay. Now, for them, they just have to play a system and keep playing it. So a casino has a system. The house is rigged, the game is rigged in their favor. In blackjack, probably got about a 2% edge, which may not sound like a lot, but
it's
it's
plenty.
significant when you play the game thousands of hours. It's still a game of luck. And it's rigged because the player has to go first. That's all. They're more likely to bust before the house does. Okay. So the house clicks. And the dealer playing for the house, playing that style, and all the dealers have to play the house's system. There'll be nuances slightly in every casino. They just have to play that system. They can't take on the players. They shouldn't be taking on the players. Once they do that, they go off the system and the edge
Yep,
is neutralized. Okay. And obviously, what they need is a casino is a very high cost business. So they need a lot of footfall. If footfall's low, they're not going to cover their costs. And that kind of whatever that edge is just gets absorbed by the costs. Now, the other side to the table, therefore, by default, the players who turn up, they have a negative edge, on average, a negative 2% edge. Now, strong players, they can reduce that slightly. Okay. They know how to play the game well. Okay. But it is still going to be, it's going to be much more marginal, but they'll still have an edge.
yeah.
Now, really, there's only two ways that you can overcome that and create a positive expectancy for yourself. One is to cheat, okay, to do something outside the law,
Yeah,
okay. And the other one is to do some sort of card counting strategy, which isn't cheating. It's legal. The casinos don't like it. They frown upon it. And they can stop you coming in. That's within their prerogative. But it's not cheating. It's playing the game.
yeah, yeah,
There may be people could come up with a few other ones. People use listening devices and things like that to somehow do a card count. But um, outside of that, that's pretty much it. And the card counter, and I talk about the MIT students here, the
yeah,
ones that were from the film 21, the film
yep,
was um, that card count can twist the odds in your favor if you know how to do it. But you still don't play a flat system. You have to go large when the count's in your favor.
yep,
Not all in, you still have to have risk management there, but you have to go large. Now, card counting is actually quite simple in theory. It's incredibly hard to do in practice, because you don't want to get caught. You get caught, you're out. Um, you're sitting there for hours on end. You don't want to get the card count wrong. You have to be showing that you're not doing it. You've got people talking to you. You've got a casino plying you a drink, which is all part of this, let's mess up your game.
sure.
Um, and somehow you've got to be playing that process well. Okay. And you can flip that edge quite significantly over to your side. But most of the time, you don't want to be, you're keeping your bet small because you've got no edge. When you've got no edge, you play a very tidy, tight game. Okay. You have to be in it to do the card count. That's the thing. You have to be putting the ante in every single time. Now, you can split those two different ways of looking at taking risk. The house approach and the player approach and say every form of trading, investing fits in with one of them. Okay. And then you look at the risk management approaches of the two of them, they're very different. You look at the strategies, they're very different. You look at the sort of payout structures, they're very different. There's a lot of people, just because you're using that house approach doesn't mean you can't be the aggressor with it. You can. You would find that most traders are using some variation of the house approach most of the time. And most beginner traders are using the house approach because it does produce a kind of yield, a low
Yeah.
yield approach. You've got to use leverage to get that yield up to something that makes it, which is where the skill starts to come in. Okay. The player approach is different. It's much more of a sporadic approach. You play when you've got the edge on your side. You have to be able to do something equivalent to card counting. In other words, assessing what the risk reward is. And your betting structure is different. Your betting structure is often placed on, I'm willing to risk X. It's like being long of an option.
Yeah.
Okay. The most you can lose is the value you pay
Max,
for the option.
maximum risk is premium paid.
Yeah. And then you're looking to make some sort of multiple with that as the strategy. And you're going to burn through a lot of options that are going to have a zero payoff. But you're hoping that the strategy works, you'll get multiple payouts much larger. Whereas the other side, the house is like you're the option writer.
Yeah.
Okay. You're the seller of the options. And you've got to do that en masse. And it's very hard for you to actually track the P&L and the risk in that. So it becomes very systematic, very strategic. Okay. And the tracking of the risk is very different. So you have to use some sort of probability based calculation that's constantly running in real time to
Yeah.
assess how much risk you got. And you're constantly, in a way, you're often trying to reduce the risk and capture the spreads that come from being the writer of the options. It's a bit like writing insurance as
For
well.
sure.
They're masters at writing risk, and that's
For
how
sure.
they make their money. That's the two approaches.
I wouldn't tell people. I shy away from telling people that my way is the right way because there's many ways to heaven. I
Yep.
tend to. I probably write, almost exclusively. When I'm long an option, it is for defensive purposes, not opportunistic opportunity.
Mhm.
And I'm very much an option seller. And
Right.
those three elements of those idea of reward, risk, and probability are different things. It is important in a person's mental game to understand the difference because I think your brain can play tricks on you. I will often tell people, let's do something ordinary. Let's go to the grocery store and let's get a liter of milk. And I'll say, is that a high risk or low risk venture? And without exception, people almost, unless they're a trader that's experienced, they'll say, well, that's low risk. I'll say, well, no. We have to start with the worst case scenario. What could happen as you enter your car and begin to go there? And people are kind of taken back to the idea that they literally, not figuratively, they literally risk their life every time they want to go to the grocery store and purchase something. And so that's the worst case scenario. And I said, so the reason that doesn't feel risky is because you have such a high probability of success that often you don't consider the magnitude of the risks. So,
Mm.
there's this blend of having knowledge. Certainly, the casino must know their rules. They've got to have a limit. If without a table limit, all of those things play into their rules. But the trader needs to have a balance not only of rules that can be successful, whether whatever card counting strategy you're going to use, you got to know what those rules are. So there's definitely a knowledge part of this, but there's also dealing with uh, the demons inside, the personal things. Now, I'll give you an example. I was probably built to be the worst trader ever in the world, I think sometimes. I'm tremendously empathetic. I'm tremendously emotional. Those that know me, I'll watch the Olympics and see some guy in a sport I've never heard of from a company I've never heard of win, and I'll cry for him. I'm so happy that this guy won the curling contest from someone from the Bahamas won the curling, or something. And the other thing I have is I have a competitive nature as a former basketball player, and I have an ego that is my enemy. So I have all these things that, I don't know if in the UK, if there's any Trekkies over there. There's a few of these nerds over here in the US, but I used to say every episode of Star Trek is the same. They face a moment they go where no man's gone before. They face a moment of risk, drama, some risk, some peril. And you have three personalities. First, you have Dr. McCoy, and his job is to make you believe that everyone is going to die for sure. He's the pessimist, and this guy would never make any money as a trader because he'd never trade. Damn it, Jim, are you out of your mind? You need a sedative. I'm not letting you go down there, but by golly, if you're going down there, I'm going down there with you, right? He's a coward. He doesn't want to take any risks at all. So he'd be terrible. Captain Kirk has an ego. That's more my personality. And he thinks he's going to go down and kill all the Klingons and against, all odds. And then you have finally Mr. Spock, who somehow they evolved without, they don't have a limbic system. They don't feel emotions of fear or panic or dread or greed. And they just calculate things. Now, the problem with being Mr. Spock is you never have any fun in life. And so I always say, if you want to live life, be like Captain Kirk. But if you want to trade, put your Mr. Spock on and kick McCoy out of the room. But could you talk a little about my ego problem? Can I lay down on your couch, Coach, and
Sure,
we could talk
sure.
about? I lay on the couch and you can talk about Andy's ego for a minute and why it's my downfall.
Okay, okay. So it's really interesting, but I'm hearing two slightly different things there. One is personality, and one is ego. And they're both really interesting because I think I when I work with traders and risk professionals and managers as well, I explore their personality using some psychometric tools.
Interesting.
Um, and we explore the different characteristics, and we often see four different types of personality in trading. And they all come to markets in very different ways, and they all bring different gifts with them, and they all bring different challenges with them as well. And for me, for them, it's about, what's really important is for them to leverage the gift they've got, and then also to manage, the challenging side of it. Um,
Liabilities, yeah.
but yeah, and for example, you talk about being emotional. We work with a lot of emotional traders, and some of them are the most brilliant traders you'll ever meet, some of the most successful guys you'll ever meet. And they really lean into their emotions. There's this kind of narrative where people say, you shouldn't be emotional trading. And these guys are like, screw you. I'm feeling the market. Now that is emotional. You
Oh,
can't
yeah.
feel the market if you're not emotional. I'm sensing the market. I'm listening to my intuition. It's giving me an edge here. It's putting me into trades that I would, that I'm seeing before they happen. Okay. And equally, they're getting me out of situations. I'm not waiting for my stop or my exit. This stinks. And that's your emotions being fully
Yeah.
engaged with, and in sync with the market. On the other side, you've got some discipline and structure they need because they lack that. And sometimes their emotions going to lead them astray. Their intuition's going to lead them astray.
For
So if
sure.
you can wrap some sort of process or structure around it that keeps them a little bit safer, um, then those are the guys that really fly. Okay. And on the other side, we have the sort of, like you say, the Dr. Spock's much more strategic, much more unemotional, much more disciplined and structured. But these guys are like, okay, you need to trust your intuition a little bit because sometimes the market's talking to you and you're not listening. And you're waiting a little bit too long and a little bit too late to get in or get out. So that's the little bit that they then need to add. So everybody's you can't be strong on everything, but you have to be what you're strong on. That becomes your main weapon. That's what you leverage in your chance to really make money in the markets. And then you have to protect yourself. But the ego is something else. The ego is something we all have. It's within us. We all have an ego. Okay. I use the example of the book. We all have a shadow. It's not good. It's not bad. It's there. Okay. Same with the ego. It's part of our functioning. Okay. We couldn't function without it. Some psychologists say it's just a metaphor for lots of different ways that the brain and the mind and the body works together in a way that we can't quite describe yet. So we call it an ego.
Yeah.
But in the metaphor that I've used in the book, based first of all starting on the idea of the shadow, is the idea that we have these kind of two selves in going together. One is the ego self, one is what I call the core self, and they work differently, they function differently. Now, this isn't the same as Daniel Kahneman's, one and two sort of think, that. It's a different sort of thing. It's along the lines of the self is really, really strong and really powerful.
Hmm.
Okay. At our core, it learns, it's capable, it can do a lot, it can intuit, it can be creative, it can value things, it can assess things. It's very strong. This is a thing in sport. You try and keep your ego out of it and bring yourself into it as much as possible.
Yeah.
You try and be as present to that core, authentic self as much as you can without letting things like fear and insecurities and self-doubt come into it. And then you've got the ego self. Now, the ego self is not all bad. Okay. It can inspire you, it drives you, it gets you going. Okay. It's what wants you to change the world and make your life better. Okay. So we're led by that sometimes. But equally, we don't, it's a very basic kind of organism, which is not good at doing things. Okay. It effectively wants you to be liked. It wants you to be respected. It wants you to have good outcomes and good results. Okay. It wants the rest of the world to like you. Because at the end of the day, we're social beings. We can't function on our own. Okay. We can't survive on our own. The ancient humans of the savannas and plains, they had to work in teams and groups.
Yes.
Okay.
To survive. Yeah.
Yeah. And for that, you need the approval of your peers, your fellows, your tribes people. And if you don't get their approval, they're going to kick you out. Okay. And you're going to be eliminated from the group, and you're not going to survive very long out
Right.
there on your own. So the ego is just this collection of things that gets you respected, liked, approved of. Okay.
Yeah.
It's also very, very powerful and strong. And it's probably the biggest driver of who we are, of our identity. Okay. And then, you know, we have this constant battle where the self is the capable bit, but the ego comes in and says, move over, I'm taking charge. This is going horribly wrong. We need to get you respected. So even just recently, I was doing a coaching session with a trader, and this trader was telling me about this internal conversation he was having, and it was moving from I all the time to it.
Yeah.
I didn't want to turn the position. I could see that it was going wrong, but I felt like an idiot if I turned. But then if I looked at the market, it was going the other way. It made sense to go the other way. But then I, again, he said, we kept going, no, I can't do that. That's these two different parts of ourselves coming in. The I,
And the
okay,
it.
looking at it subjectively and how it's going to make us look and feel. And then the other half, the self, looking at it objectively and going, it's going there. Dude, just go along. The ego's going, dude, get out of the way. No, you're going to look stupid. Let me take over. So, and we've got that constant battle going on all the time. The ego is a bad trader. It's going to get in the way. It's going to make you feel nervous.
The
It's
ego
going
is
to
the
kick
enemy.
you off your process because it's the process. The thing that runs all the way through the book is this idea of process. It's the
Yeah.
process that delivers. The process is the antidote to the ego.
Before we talk about process, I'd like to dive into, you mentioned psychometrics, which means we're going to measure certain things. And there's a frontier, uh, neuroscience, that I believe is the most exciting frontier. We've kind of looked in the depths of the oceans to a large degree. We've explored space as we are able. But that space between our ears is one of the great mysteries of consciousness. I mean, it is something. And, it's interesting how many neuroscientists I've had on the podcast, and people say, why in the world would the cash flow, what does that have to do with neuroscience? Well, because we're decision makers, and this machinery that makes the decisions. I'd like to speak a little bit about my experiences with how I think my brain might work, but maybe you can clarify, and we can just have a little conversation before we get into the process of what is going on in my noggin or anyone's noggin when they're taking risk or investing. I think about neurotransmitters, and people, maybe this is, I don't have really the authority to talk on it because I'm very much a hobbyist and a layman in studying the topic. But I know that if someone were to imagine a color wheel, we have three primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. And all of the, when your computer says, yeah, we can do, 20 million colors, it's really out of those three. Well, we have a handful of neurotransmitters, and the balance of those neurotransmitters is much more than three, but every emotion that we feel is a combination of chemistry and
Mm.
dosage of those neurotransmitters. So while we might have a range of emotions, we might have some primary neurotransmitters, epinephrine, adrenaline, oxytocin, and the chemical cocktail that we experience. Well, as an athlete, I knew that I was not going to perform well without proper physiology. If I'm not stretched, if I don't have, there's a reason we have a warm up before a competition, because it's
Mm.
to prepare our body for what's going to happen. Or you can have torn muscles, or at maximum you could injure yourself, but at a minimum you're not as quick. You're not the blood isn't pumping, the oxygen's out there. You're not as limber. You're not jumping as high. You're not reacting as well. So at a minimum you have a reduced performance, and a maximum at the other end you could injure yourself. So there is a mental, there are so many mental states. And one of the things the casino needs is consistency. That's why those guys look like they're made out of cardboard, and they just keep their game very consistent mentally. Where the challenge of trading is I've got to have that mind right every time, because it's what you're going to do. You need to be consistent as well. And one of the games we play in my house, you mentioned, I thought at the top of the show, you mentioned this, and I wanted to circle back to that as well. I think it fits in what's happening here, is the idea of self-awareness.
Yeah.
So what is self-awareness? Well, the way we do it in my house, which is this is a game changer for getting along as a family, is, people have seen the little snow globes that you shake up, and it gives the illusion of snowing inside. And I often feel almost like deified as I look into that snow globe, as if I'm the celestial dictator that is looking down on these figurines in their little Christmas scene. I'm an observer. And there's people in the snow globe that don't know I'm there, that are unaware. And there's the people outside the snow globe. Well, when I'll be in my life and I get wrapped up and I don't have self-awareness, I don't have the ability to be an observer of myself, but I'm inside of the emotions. I'm inside the experience. And my wife and I will often see, if our boys or something, you see the temperature in a family situation start to rise. One of the things we'll say is, hey, shall we step out of the snow globe for a moment? I feel like we're in the snow globe. Shall we step out and observe this non-judgmentally, and allow our temperature to go back down and observe this instead of being in it? So we call that getting out of the snow globe in my house. That's
Wow,
probably
I
the
love that.
silly. That's probably the silliest. It's probably the
I think that's
silliest,
brilliant.
that people ever heard. But if
It's
something
brilliant.
starts to happen, I'll say, "Son, why don't we step out of the snow globe?" And we found
Oh,
that that's a nice place to visit. We like being the observer of what's going on, rather than being in the snowstorm and not being able to see from that perspective. So that's a lot, like, that's a long question. That's a long question. But what is happening in my brain? Uh, what is happening as I experience these risks? I know we have MRI machines that they put people at Harvard in an MRI, an active one, where they can see the blood flowing. And they'll say, when people find they're wrong, it reacts the same way as if they're being chased by a bear. I don't know how they got the bear baseline, but maybe
yeah.
speak about what in the world is happening in my brain. How does it, let me shorten and summarize the question. What's happening in
Okay.
my
So
brain? What neurology is going on? And why is
I,
it important to be aware of it? That's a better, shorter version. What's happening
okay.
in my brain?
At this point, I'm going to disappoint you. I'm just an amateur psychologist,
Yeah.
like yourself. I mean, I've been on psychology courses and programs.
Sure. Well,
So
me as
so
well.
I've read a lot, and but I'm not an expert on that. But there is something I talk about, and again, with the idea of using this performance process cycle, is is to make this point that when we get to the act point, when we engage, when we come into full contact with the market, which means we're taking risk, or perhaps we're not taking risk when we felt maybe we should have done. Okay, it's whatever you do, whatever your decision is, the decision.
Yes.
Okay, you're now in a state of performance anxiety. Okay, so I don't so much talk about the psychology, but I talk about the ego coming in again, the metaphor.
Yeah.
Okay, the ego is really concerned when you're in that performance bit. It acts as if the entire world is watching you, as if you're on stage.
Yeah.
Okay, and as if you no longer are present to what you should be doing. You get taken over, and you almost like you become someone else. Which is
Oh,
why
yeah.
afterwards, sometimes you can look back when you step out the snow globe and go, what was I thinking? Why did I do that? You don't even know why you did it. You weren't even aware you were doing it sometimes. Sometimes when I look back on my trading career and I can look back at certain days and go, okay, so I said I was going to buy here and sell there. And it went down there and then it went up there and I should have made a load of money. But actually what I did is it went down there and I sold it and then I brought it back up there and I've lost a load of money. And I had to plan for it and I did something completely different. What was I thinking? Okay. That is, you go into that fight or flight response. Okay. Which is not, we're human. We can't help it. We've got emotions. I think you referred to that at the very beginning. We're not robots. We're not Vulcans or
Yeah.
whatever. We're we have emotions. We're animals at the end of the day. Okay, really smart thinking animals. Some people not so smart, but at the end of the day, those animal instincts control us much more than our prefrontal cortex. Okay, which is a modern kind of add-on to who we are. It's the bit that's made us capable of thinking and rationalizing and sort of conceiving things. Okay, but it's only got very limited brain power. It's like an old Apple iPhone. It won't last very long. Okay,
Yeah.
compared to the
Yeah.
newer ones. But it's got very little thinking power. And I talk a little bit in there about some research that's sort of explored around that. We've only got very limited thinking power to be disciplined, to be structured, to think well. Doesn't matter how intelligent you are, you've still got this old mammalian operating system
You
running
bet.
through us with neurochemicals and everything. Becoming more aware of at the times of day, maybe, or situations or contexts where you operate best and where you operate suboptimally is really helpful. I talk a little bit in there about time of day trading. I had one incredible individual that I never actually coached myself, a colleague of mine coached him, but he asked me if I could run the psychometric on this guy. And I didn't know who he was. I just ran this psychometric profile, gave him the results of the test. And he said to me, what do you think about this guy from the results of the test? And I said, well, it's possibly the most risk-averse guy I think I've ever seen. Is he a trader? You know, he must be very nervous and anxious a lot of the time. He went, yeah, he's a trader. He said he made $100 million last year for his hedge fund. And I'm like,
Crazy.
what? What? How? I couldn't imagine him trading in a
Yeah.
style of a hedge fund style that would produce that sort of result with that sort of really strong form of risk aversion and anxiety. And he said
Yeah.
what he's done, and this is where he's put a bolt on of his own, he's found a style and strategy which meets his personal, it aligns. You hear me talk a lot about alignment in there. It aligns with who he is, it aligns with his personality, it aligns with his nature. And really, I mean, it was that simple. He day traded at a hedge fund.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
He had done it for 20 years. He'd become an expert at it. He only traded liquid stuff, liquid currencies, okay,
Forex.
currency pairs, because, yeah, products. Because if it goes wrong, he hit the escape button very quickly.
Yeah.
And he never traded after 1 o'clock in the afternoon, even if he got the signals on his method or signal or strategy, because every day at 1 o'clock, he decided he's burnt out.
Yeah.
Okay. He's got nothing left to give.
Yeah.
All right. He's full on all morning until then. So even if he gets the best signal ever at, say, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, he's not taking it because he's probably going to mess it up. Okay. That's the high probability. And he'll start taking afternoon trades regularly. It's like an alcoholic, just one, he'll be taking. So he goes home with no overnight risk. Now that suits him. He has a great night's sleep. Okay. And he,
He's ready
he,
to
he
roll.
trades off his nerves and the processes and systems he has for the mornings. Now, that to me is just, you know, find a strategy that works for you and then just hit it hard. Okay.
The reason I like books like Mastering the Mental Game of Trading is simply bringing attention to it, just the very practice of bringing attention and increasing self-awareness of this part of the game, the ego part, the personality part, the emotion part of the game will improve. You mentioned ego, and I had a bit of a flashback. One of the worst periods of my performance was early on when I decided I was going to be a teacher.
Mm,
And you mentioned that you're doing things as if you're on a stage. Well, as a teacher, you kind of are. And I remember how all of a sudden I couldn't take losses, and that's a really important part of particularly the option game.
mm,
Now shares, I don't really care about price at all. Prices have no concern. I'm caring about fundamentals, cash flow, growth, long-term stuff. So shares are shares. But options are always, as a writer, obviously I want time decay. I'm writing the front month. I'm not going out more than 30 to 45 days at the very most. I want that time decay, right there. But in that, and even with the high probabilities, maybe I choose some very small deltas. And I'm saying, look, the probability of me getting called out on this or having this put to me is very, very small. It's going to happen. I mean, you mentioned that 2%, 2% is 2%, 10% is 10%. It's going to happen. So when those things required adjustment for loss, and you take a loss in those situations, you're supposed to get
mm.
out while the getting's good and let your gains outnumber your loss, and the depth of those gains, don't let the depth of those losses grow. But I couldn't do it because I felt like, well, in the back of my mind somewhere, there was a voice that was saying, well, you're a teacher now. You're teaching people how to do this. You're not allowed to lose ever. And I did worse by saying, trying to save stuff that I shouldn't have tried to save. And I had to stop trading. And then I felt like, well, how can you teach this if you're not trading for a while? And I took months off. I just had to stop and take some months off to reevaluate. So these experiences happen even to the teachers. We're all human beings. And another thing I think is experience. As I've gotten older, my processes they get refined, they get less emotional, they get more
Mm.
mechanical. And as you find that niche that you talked about, that slot of my personality, like I have guys on my team that, Noah is very much more a technical analyst. I'm more of a fundamentals guy. We have students that really need both teachers. So, let's talk about your website. It's www.alpharcubed. So that's alpha, alpharcubed.com. You can learn more about that there. And you can pick up at Amazon and wonderful retailers everywhere. Mastering the mental game of trading, harnessing the power of inner self to fuel trading outperformance. The ability to look inward. I will say it again, when you engage in either entrepreneurship or investing or trading, something other than the traditional job, your weaknesses, they just get exposed so quickly. You can see them so fast that the opportunity for personal development is part of the fun. I'll share one more story with you, and I'll give you the last word. So I have a guy on my team. He was a Series 4 option principal. He managed the risk of hundreds of traders on the floor at a time for a Wall Street firm for a number of years. So he's not only managing his risk, he's managing everybody's, which actually is often easier to manage theirs than yours.
Yeah.
But he's a tremendous risk manager. And he and I were talking about the non-financial benefits of what your book would do, the idea of self-awareness and kind of learning a little bit about your temperament. And he said a real interesting thing. He has young children. He had his children later in life, like I did. And he talked to his kids about, he goes, "You guys ever see mom and dad fight or something? We don't really fight. Our parents fought, but your mom and dad don't fight." And the little girl said, "Oh, yes, you do. One day mom bought me a soda and you suggested that maybe we're buying too many sugary drinks." And that was it. I mean, in his child's mind, that was a fight, right?
Yeah.
And he said the temperament of controlling emotions, that trading is almost an arena that helps us be so self-aware of this stuff that it actually translates into other areas of your life where there's risk or stress or the fight or flight. You become so attuned to those swellings and the experience of flight or flight and the neurotransmitters. You become so aware of those that you can actually begin to apply that self-awareness in other areas of your life. So I'm excited to recommend Mastering the Mental Game of Trading. Steven, last words for people who are new. Many people in our audience, we're growing all the time. So let's say someone's new and they've just started trading. First counsel you would give the newbie.
Well, actually, I do get approached by quite a lot of new people who want to kind of work with me. And I normally warn them off a little bit. I'm like, first, you've got to learn the basics of the job. You've got to learn the fundamentals of the job and the
Yes,
technical aspects of the job. There's no
yes,
point coming to someone like me to work with you on that because you've not got really badly beaten up yet.
yeah.
Okay. So let's spend a few years in the job, see if you like it, get beaten up a few times, and then we can talk. That's, that's, I mean, this job is a job of getting beaten up all the time. Okay. It's got so many,
It's a
it's such a
resilience
great job
issue.
and I love doing it and the upside potential is huge. Um, but I think it's like being a boxer, a mental boxer. You're going to get beaten up a lot, even if you love boxing. Okay. And you just want to learn to box better. You want to learn to beat the other guy, to, how to conserve your energy. I use quite a lot of boxing and sport analogies in the book. Okay. It's learning to do
Similar.
whatever you do better. It's the same lessons. A lot of people have come back to me and said, the stuff you talk about in the book, it's not just about trading, it works in everything. Okay. So everything that works in life works in trading, and everything that works in trading works in life. And the message in the book is the same. And it's just I've had a lot of people, and I always once I had someone I was coaching who was working at an investment firm where he sold investment products, and he decided he wanted to be a trader. He wanted to get more active in active investing or trading his own stuff.
Yeah.
And he said he thinks that's his future. He's kind of lost interest a little bit in the sort of managing other people's investments and trying to sell investment products. Um, and after about 6 months or something, he said, "Look, I've just got to let you know that I've decided I don't want to go forward with my trading career." And I said, "Okay, it's a bit of a surprise. Why is that?" He said, "My sales have gone through the roof." He said, "I'm selling all this stuff." I've had that conversation about a dozen times with people who have
Interesting.
come to me to improve their coaching, and their sales has gone up. So, it's
Interesting.
the same stuff in life, in everywhere.
Fantastic. Well, we sure appreciate your time and being willing to work with the time difference coming from London to here in the States. Again, it is Mastering the Mental Game of Trading, harnessing the power of the inner self to fuel trading out performance, a great personal development opportunity. If you would, Stephen, hang on just a bit after I close the show so I can properly thank you and do a recap with you. You've been listening to the Cashflow Academy podcast. I'm Andy Tanner. This is where we try our very best to make things simple. Also, drop by yourinvestingclass.com and check out some of the things we have there at no charge. Until next time, keep your position sizes right, find your niche, get out of your snow globe once in a while, and we'll see you next time.